And of course, the one that just probably concerns me the most is that 25% of the people in our country are taking psychiatric drugs. And since the drugs are useless, there's no such thing as a chemical imbalance in the brain. This means that we have done something terrible to 25% of the people in this country without any expectation that they could be benefiting in any way, shape, or form. And for some of these people, they're never coming back. I mean, it's the leading cause of disability in our country. Every day we put 850 adults and 250 children on disability as a result of taking those drugs. When you think about the enormity of this and that it hasn't stopped, I mean, there's more caution, I think. I think more people are starting to wake up and realize it, but it hasn't stopped. It's going on while we're talking here. Somebody's getting drugged because they're stressed or anxious or things that just people feel every day. So I'm just concerned about all of it. It changes in little tiny ways where there's an increase in awareness and there are more people coming to our side of the table in terms of being concerned about it all and wanting to do something about it. But my gosh, it's a gargantuan mess, and people are being hurt.
This is episode 48 of the Ownstream podcast, featuring Dr. Pam Popper.
Welcome to the Ownstream podcast. Really happy you're with us this week. I'm Stephen Shelley.
And I'm Teresa Scopa.
And get on your hard hats is what I would say, because this is Dr. Pam Popper's second appearance on the Ownstream podcast, and we talked to her last year in a more general way about her journey and her path and kind of all the things that she's dealt with in terms of promoting a whole foods plant-based diet, how it reverses disease, and we started to get into some of the details and some of the more, let's call them flashpoint issues that we cover in this episode. And so we knew we wanted to talk to her again, and I think talking to her every year will be something we aim for because, as you'll hear, she's very eloquent, she's very informed, she has all sorts of data and knowledge to support her views, but mostly what I appreciate is her willingness to go there. Many, many doctors or many in the profession won't go there, and she goes there, and she's very, very clear. And so get on your hard hats means we're about to talk about mental illness and how, in her view, there really is no such a thing as a chemical imbalance. We're going to talk about vaccines for quite some time. Many, many people are triggered by these issues. We also talk about reversing disease with diet and food, and the undercurrent to the whole conversation is the failure of our medical system to not only heal us, but to promote wellness and to promote a lifestyle that won't actually cause any of these issues. And it starts with vaccines, and it kind of goes into diet and how we just pollute the human body with all this needless chemistry.
Yeah, Pam is a wealth of knowledge. She is, I think I said this last time, but I'll say it here to cover this episode as well, is probably the most well-read, informed, passionate person on this issue that I've known, and this is an issue I care about, so I read a lot about it. She reads every article that comes out that's relevant to the topics that she covers, and she works with countless patients on a diet that promotes health and reverses disease. So she is wealth of experience and knowledge from her own work and what she reads. She cites evidence after evidence in this conversation. But this was a conversation that we knew we wanted to have, both because there was so much more to get into last time, as Stephen said, but also because, honestly, especially I think as the new year comes about, I've been feeling it a lot, but it's all around us with family members getting older and things coming up like the flu, but people are looking at health around the new year, and I feel like I'm just constantly hearing misinformation that just breaks my heart. I hear it at cafes, I hear it among family members. I just want to scream, honestly, sometimes, because I know that there's just a lot of bad information that we've been fed about health and healthcare, and I watch people that I love dearly go through the healthcare system in dealing with chronic disease and not being cured, but being put more dependent on the healthcare system. And my father died of cancer. I've seen other people die to chronic diseases that could have possibly been helped or, delayed or possibly reversed entirely through a plant-based diet and through better self-care and health. And it's heartbreaking to me, and I get angry about it. So this is something that's a passion of ours, is to get true information out there about these issues, about things that you can do today to empower yourself to live a healthy life where you don't need to be dependent on the healthcare system. And also really this conversation through the issues that Stephen enumerated there, this conversation gets into the profit motive and how pharmaceutical industries have really taken over all of the authorities of the healthcare system, from the CDC and the FDA to your daily doctor. I think there's a lot of really good people working in the system who want to be of service and want to make a difference, and who got into healthcare because they wanted to help other people. And instead it's been so perverted by money motive. And so this is the information that Pam gets out there to try to help people. Her mission really is to help people make informed decisions about their own health and healthcare. And that's the work she does daily with individuals. She puts out a ton of content on her YouTube channel through her classes and her conferences. And as she says at the end of this conversation, it's exactly what she wants to be doing. And it's clear that she is meant to be doing this.
Yeah, she's somebody living her calling. She's 61 years old. She tells us that in the conversation, and she has no interest in retiring. She is lit up on a daily basis to do the work she's doing. It comes through in droves in this conversation. We first learned of Pam a bunch of years ago, and we watched the groundbreaking film Forks Over Knives. And she's in that film along with T. Colin Campbell and Caldwell Esselstyn and many, many other really true heroic pioneering doctors who are informing the public about the realities of nutrition and health. So we first learned of her through that film, which I think was a turning point for me in reconsidering the food I put in my body. And that was what kind of toppled me into the vegan diet, and really more specifically the whole foods plant-based diet, which has served me profoundly well in the last 5 years. And so we've been fans of hers ever since. We've consulted with her personally on various things. And she's been such an extraordinary resource. We're very, very fortunate to know her, to be connected to her, and we can't be prouder of sharing her message with you on this episode of the Ownstream podcast. We will link to the prior episode where we spoke with her last year. I think the two of these in tandem will blow your mind if you're new to this, and will support you in taking responsibility for your health, taking it away from all those authorities that don't actually have your best interest at heart. So that is ultimately her message. So sit back, relax if you can, because she comes really hot and hard in this, and it's wonderful. And we'll be back afterwards to wrap up, but do enjoy this amazing conversation with the absolutely heroic Dr. Pam Popper.
So Pam, welcome for the second time to the Ownstream podcast.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be back, because I think, like we were just talking before we got on the air, that last time we chattered away for over an hour and could have done it for another 5 hours, because there's so many things to talk about. And I'm sure we'll feel that way at the end of this one too.
Totally. That's exactly it. When we were just putting together the best of episode, we were reminded of everything we covered and how we left off with you saying that no, there were like 1,000 other topics that we could have covered. So we have a bunch of things that we want to cover with you today, and I'm sure other things will unfold from what you've been working on and other things that have come up. Last time we talked a lot about the whole foods plant-based diet and the advantages of diet versus supplements in terms of health and prevention of disease and healing. There are a lot of other things we want to talk to you about, but we wanted to just open it up to you first to talk about if there's anything. It was about a year ago when we did our podcast. If there's anything that's happened in terms of new findings or research or things that are right, at the tip of your tongue, or urgent issues right now that you would want to kind of put out there, and things that might have come up in the last year.
Well, it unfolds every day. I mean, the disaster unfolds every day. And in fact, I felt so bad about covering the disaster every week that I filmed a video clip yesterday where I recognized some good things going on in medicine just so that it wouldn't seem like all I do is complain. And I'm not complaining. We're doing something about it. But you know what I mean? Every Tuesday and Thursday I get on video clips and talk about the latest study that shows that we shouldn't be doing this. And now there are 17 million more people hurt by that. And of course, the one that just probably concerns me the most is that 25% of the people in our country are taking psychiatric drugs. And since the drugs are useless, there's no such thing as a chemical imbalance in the brain. This means that we have done something terrible to 25% of the people in this country without any expectation that they could be benefiting in any way, shape, or form. And for some of these people, they're never coming back. I mean, it's the leading cause of disability in our country. Every day we put 850 adults and 250 children on disability as a result of taking those drugs. When you think about the enormity of this and that it hasn't stopped, I mean, there's more caution, I think. I think more people are starting to wake up and realize it, but it hasn't stopped. It's going on while we're talking here. Somebody's getting drugged because they're stressed or anxious or things that just people feel every day. So I'm just concerned about all of it. It changes in little tiny ways where there's an increase in awareness and there are more people coming to our side of the table in terms of being concerned about it all and wanting to do something about it. But my gosh, it's a gargantuan mess and people are being hurt. How's that for a positive thing to say at the beginning of the year?
We're off and running. You know, it's funny because at the very end of last year's conversation, you sort of left with that, like, gosh, and I'd love to talk about depression and medicine. And of course, it's amazing that you pick right up from there because that was one of the things we definitely wanted to cover. So when a person is quote unquote depressed or bipolar, what is happening there? What is the phenomena that exists within their psyche, within their body? And then maybe we could talk about what would actually resolve that. Because one thing I've noticed is that when people get on these medications, by and large, they stay on them. That there's no exit strategy in many cases. And
well, you can't just stop taking them. It's harder to get off Xanax than heroin. It often cannot be done on an outpatient basis. So you can't just listen to this podcast and say, I've always suspected this was the case, so I'm going to throw out my Wellbutrin. You're likely to end up in the ER. So it's difficult to get off of the drugs. And so let's talk about what's really going on. And the more you learn about what's really going on with people, the more disgusted you become about the whole thing. So the first thing to understand, and let's separate out a group of people that we shouldn't even be talking about them having anything wrong with them. Children who don't behave have parenting problems, teacher problems, discipline problems. This has gone on since the beginning of time, and you know how we've always remedied it? Parents. That's why kids have parents, okay? It is the job of parents to teach kids how to sit still and pay attention and respect other people and not be the center of attention all the time and that sort of thing. And so parents don't like hearing this. People don't like hearing anything that sounds like personal responsibility. We face that with the diet issue, and it's no different here. But the bottom line is that children, if you allow children to not have any rules and structure and that sort of thing when they're 3 years old, it's pretty predictable that when they're sitting in a classroom at the age of 6, they're going to become troublemakers and distracted and unable to sit still. They never learned how to sit still in the first place. So these are not kids that have problems. These are kids who have parents who have problems, and that's fixable. You learn how to parent, and some parents want to learn how to do that. They understand that they may have made some mistakes, and now we got to do things differently. And it can be teachers too. School is a very uninteresting place for really bright kids, and sometimes a change in classrooms is necessary, or schools. And then we have a whole class of people who are not depressed. Let's start with depression. What's going on with them is they're dehydrated, poorly fed, they don't exercise. And if I stopped drinking water, started eating garbage, and didn't exercise for 3 weeks, I'd feel like them. Tired, not much interest in life, no get up and go, would rather be napping than talking to you, that kind of thing. So what's happening is because everybody's prescribing the drugs, people are going into a family practice doctor's office and who says, hi, how are you doing? Well, I'm tired, I don't feel like doing anything. And it sounds like depression to a doctor, and he says, maybe some Zoloft would be good for you. And then we have people who are just suffering from everyday life. It's not pathology. So what I mean by this is that if somebody in your family dies, it's pretty normal to feel sad. In fact, we'd be worried about you if you weren't sad. It might be normal, depending upon how close you were to this person, to feel sad for a pretty long time. This is not something that needs drugging. This is called life. And we have gotten to the place right now, and it's largely in part, well, it's largely due to the drug companies and medical profession, institutions, popular psychology. We've gotten to the place where we don't think anybody's ever supposed to have a nanosecond of discomfort. And if you should experience such a thing, you're entitled to feel better immediately without any work involved. So how you can get that is with a drug. And there's a guy who wrote a book called Artificial Happiness. What a total perfect name for what we're doing. There's no real happiness, because happiness comes from living a purposeful life and having ethics and values and contributing to your community. This is drugged up happiness. It isn't even real happiness, but people don't know the difference. And so that's what's really going on here. And when you take a look at when people are feeling super anxious, depressed, psychotic even. I just read a book on schizophrenia that was fascinating. Whatever people are doing, whatever they're thinking, however they behave, they have reasons for it. And if you know the reasons and you can talk to them about it, you can help them resolve it. But it's not a chemical imbalance in the brain. It's thinking, distorted thinking patterns, fear, abuse. I mean, all kinds of things can contribute to somebody having a psychological issue. Notice I don't call it mental illness. I don't believe in it. A psychological issue. And so you resolve the problem. You don't drug up the person.
So let's talk about that chemical imbalance in the brain, right? Because that's one of the phrases that has just, the marketing phrases, I guess, that has gotten ingrained in people when they, we were just talking about a family member who has, it just seems a little bit depressed, possibly. And, immediately other family members came on and said well, it's probably a chemical imbalance in the brain. So where did that come from? Well, you've said many times that's never been proven. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, and when I tell you this, you'd laugh out loud if it wasn't all so serious. So it has never been proven, and one of the reasons is the only way you can evaluate neurotransmitters in the brain is to grind up the brain and assay the material. Now, I don't know about, we don't advise people to have that procedure here. I mean, if you think we think it's a bad idea. But the one time that it was done didn't involve humans. Researchers took a group of rats who appeared to be depressed, and I think the first red flag should be, I'm not sure how you can tell if rats are depressed. But apparently these researchers were able to discern this. And they, on autopsy, ground up their brains and discovered that their serotonin levels were low, and that was all that was needed to start this whole chemical imbalance in the brain situation. Now, what's interesting to me is the backpedaling that's going on. I mean, the drugging of people is still going on. And one psychiatrist even wrote an editorial about how they should just stop teaching psychiatrists to talk to people. It distracts from drugging. That's what he basically said. We need to know a lot more about pharmacology. We don't want to talk to anybody. But Ronald Pies, who used to be the editor of Psychiatric Times, has been put on the spot a number of times. And here are some of the types of things he's said in response to all of this. He says that at one point in time he said that the chemical imbalance theory was an urban legend. And it was never taken seriously by psychiatrists. In fact, it was promoted by people who didn't like psychiatrists very much. And then he went on to explain later, because there's a whole series of interviews he's done. This is a guy who should stay off the radio because he doesn't help himself at all. But he said in another interview that one of the reasons why psychiatrists use this term is not because they believe it, because we all know there's no evidence. He actually said this on NPR. But one of the reasons why this got talked about is that it allows psychiatrists to assure their patients that they've been educated and to write the prescription. And he meandered all over the place, but essentially this is just a way to write prescriptions. And then when pressed further, he said, well, maybe it was just a little white lie. A little white lie that's resulted in 25% of the country being drugged. Wow. Some people, millions of people, disabled for life as the result of it.
And so talk about the relationship between the doctors who prescribe these medications and the companies that produce them, because that's the real dirty underbelly of the whole deal, isn't it?
Well, that's part of it, and the psychiatry profession is the worst of all. All medical professional associations, the Academy of Pediatrics and the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. I mean, all these associations take money from food companies, drug companies. They'll take money from anybody who will give it. So does the FDA and the CDC, by the way. But all these associations take money. The psychiatrists take more than any. It's one of the reasons they're the only practice specialty. The journal's free to psychiatrists because of the drug sponsorship. There's been a little bit less of it. When I say a little bit less, I'm talking about, barely statistically significant reduction in the amount of money that the drug companies give to the American Psychiatric Association. But all of this is bought and paid for. I mean, a colleague of mine, Peter Gertzer, wrote a book called Deadly Medicines and Organized Crime, and he said in the beginning of his book that the reason he called it that is that if you take a look at what the mafia does, they bribe the government, they steal money, and they kill people. That's what the drug companies do. It's exactly their behavior. And everybody's for sale. They buy academia. They own academics, these departments where it's publish or perish and you get rewarded for the money that you bring in. Where does that money come from? It comes from the drug companies. Excuse me. So they're controlling the research. They're controlling the practice protocols. They control it all.
Well, this leads well into another topic we wanted to cover with you in terms of the surge of drug companies and the surge of pharmaceuticals, which is vaccines. This has been a topic in our face since we had a child, of course, with lots of people wanting to know what decisions we were making. And, recently it's also with family members getting shots to supposedly protect themselves from illnesses that our child might contract, like whooping cough or the flu shot. This is flu season, so the flu shot is in our face everywhere. Would love to hear you let's talk about vaccines. So maybe beginning with, what evidence, if any, there is of efficacy.
Well, it's interesting you should ask. I just filmed a video clip yesterday. There have been 150 mumps outbreaks during one 18-month period of time. Health departments have reported. So do you know what the CDC's answer to that is? We have to do a third booster.
Of course.
Which is because, and so sane people, you've heard the true definition of insanity is that you do the same thing again and again, you hope for different results. So a sane person would look at something like that and say, maybe we should take a step back and take a look at this and see if we can figure out what's going on before we do more of this. But in the efficacy rates, the CDC's answer to these types of questions is just unbelievably off the mark. So they're not very effective. That's why we keep having boosters. That's why we have whooping cough out. All 49 out of 50 states have reported whooping cough outbreaks. I wrote an article on this not too long ago. The leading cause of shingles is the chickenpox vaccine. It postpones getting shingles until you're older. I mean, when I was a kid, probably you guys are a lot younger than I am, but I grew up in that era where if the neighbor kids had mumps or measles or something, you got dropped off so that you got it right away. And I think our whole second grade class didn't go to school for a week because we all had the measles. Well, that gives you lifetime protection. I'm highly unlikely to get shingles because I had the chickenpox as a kid. Mm-hmm. Well, what we've done is we've just kicked the can down the road, and now we have older people who are far more vulnerable getting shingles. So, and then you get into all the misbehavior and the conflicts of interest. And the one thing, I wrote an article about this at the end of the year, and I can make it available to you if you'd like. If you take a look at all of this, if they take an objective look at this, could possibly agree with what's going on. And the place to start the discussion is the fact that the vaccine makers have complete immunity against any claims that result from the harm by their products. Now, let's think about this a different way. Let's say that the United States government went to the car makers and said, listen, we think it would be better if you could make cars without being encumbered with safety requirements. So seriously. So what we're going to do is we're going to charge $250 tax on every car. We'll put it in a fund, and if people get killed in car accidents because their brakes don't work or, things like that, we'll just pay it out of that fund, and then you guys can just be innovative as all get out. You can turn out cars like gangbusters, and you won't have to worry about all that. Now, I don't think very many people would feel comfortable buying cars under those circumstances. And so that's essentially what we've done. And that's one of the reasons why the vaccination schedule keeps increasing the way that it does. When I was writing the mumps article about this vaccine, the third dose, I checked the World Health Organization's website. There are 138 vaccines in development right now. So if only a fraction of them get approved, and probably most of them will, because the drug companies get what they want, and then we've got all the boosters from these new ones and the boosters from the old ones, I think what we can look forward to is that at some point in time, adults will walk around with an IV drip bag, a constant drip of vaccine into the bloodstream so that we can just try to keep anything bad from happening. It's an insane thing, but it eventually we're going to get that way. How many shots can you give somebody? So that's my opening statement.
Yeah, okay. So one of the first objections people often pose when you debate vaccines is that, we wiped out polio with the polio vaccine.
Well, no, you didn't.
So tell us the truth about that. What's the real story there?
Well, the first thing is one thing that I've started doing, and I teach all the members here to do it and that sort of thing, is you must make people come up with evidence. Okay, show me the evidence that you wiped out polio. I want to know the difference between your parroting what you saw on YouTube from somebody who said that this happened versus you've read articles and you have journal articles, because I'm going to show you some journal articles that show that polio was on its way out, and so were measles, death from measles, for a long time before the vaccines were introduced. Tetanus, the tetanus infection rate started dropping in the 1880s, went down every year. And then in 1947, we introduced the tetanus vaccine, and we tell everybody that we wiped out tetanus because of the vaccine. Right. It had dropped every year for almost 100 years, or 60 years. So the bottom line is that that's just not true. And if forced to come up with evidence, most of the people who say these things wouldn't be able to do it. They're parroting.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I'll tell you some other ridiculous things they say. When you get into the discussion, if you really want to send people off the rails, bring up the discussion of vaccines and autism. And I love the explanations that people come up with for this. My favorite one is that there's really been no increase in the autism rate, because what's happened is that pediatricians are better at diagnosing it, and the better diagnostics is what has accounted for it. And so what this means is that we have to assume that children who banged their head on the wall and did arm flapping, nobody knew that was a problem until doctors got better training. And now that we all recognize that that's not normal behavior, the autism rate went up. Are you kidding me? Yeah. I mean, this is just insane behavior. And then what my question is we know that 93% of all autistic people will require supervised living or have to live with their parents or family members. So where did all those autistic children go that are now adults? Mm-hmm. Nobody's saying they got abducted by aliens. I mean, we can't account for them. Mm-hmm. The institutions aren't full of them. So the preposterous, crazy ideas that people throw out, and they're just repeating what they've heard because they find it so difficult to believe that they could have bought into such a ridiculous story. Mm.
Maybe you can talk a bit about what's in vaccines, because many people think it's just like, this, ineffective type strain of the disease that will then, confer immunity, right? But there's a lot of other stuff in vaccines that may be causing things like autism. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I'm actually pulling up an article that I wrote on this, and so you can go to the CDC has on their website a list. They have every single vaccine and a list of what's in it. Okay, so I'm just I picked out a few that I put in a list here when I wrote an article on this, and my proposal to people is when you go to see your pediatrician who starts beating you up about vaccines, say, you want my child to get the X, Y, or Z vaccine. vaccine. So I took this right off the CDC's website, and I'd like for you to tell me what these ingredients are and show me safety data that it's okay to inject this in my kid. Okay, so fetal bovine serum, monosodium glutamate, FD&C yellow number 6 aluminum lake dye, anti-foaming agent, dried lactose, casein, Vero cells, a continuous line of monkey kidney cells, calf serum, normal human diploid cells, several forms of aluminum, complex fermentation media, whatever that is, egg protein, human diploid lung fibroblasts, urea, human embryonic lung cell cultures, and guinea pig cell cultures. That's a short list of just interesting things. So most of these, for example, I think I have the flu ones here. There are several flu vaccines, and every one of the flu vaccines has 6 or 7 ingredients like what I just read to you. So who knows what all this is and why is it in there and all that sort of thing. And then I got after I put this on YouTube, I got some hate mail from a couple of people who said that you talked about in the bloodstream of kids. Don't you know that the injections are intramuscular? And I wanted to write back and say, yeah, you idiot, but it goes to the bloodstream. I mean, okay, so I don't know where you got your medical degree, and I'm a tiny bit frightened to think about it, but right? So yeah, those are some of the ingredients.
Well, I hear the XYZ vaccine's coming out soon.
Yeah. Well, there's a vaccine for the whole idea is to keep anybody from getting anything, and you can't do that. And furthermore, there's an increasing amount of evidence that's showing that one of the things that kids do in order to build their immune systems is they get sick and they recover, and they get sick and they recover. It's like going to the muscles, you have to have some practice, and so that's why kids get sick. And so we're perturbing the immune system in a very bizarre way with all these vaccines, and in the meantime our kids keep getting sicker. And I remember one nurse testified in front of Congress on this issue, and her comment, I'm paraphrasing here, was something to the effect of something is going on. I mean, we're here to talk about vaccines, but she said, I've been a school nurse for years and years, and every year our kids get sicker. They've got autoimmune diseases and allergies and asthma, and they have learning disabilities. I mean, something terrible is happening to our kids, and it's almost incredulous with anybody that there isn't more interest in figuring out what the heck it is.
And so there seem to be 2 instances where one is confronted with vaccines. One is new parents like ourselves, where we have a baby, and then within under a minute, there's a recommended shot for a minute's old child
for a ridiculous disease.
Hepatitis B, which is spread by needle sharing and promiscuous sex, which we know has been a problem in nurseries and hospitals for a long time. So I know intervention was needed, but come on.
So you have that
insanity.
So you have the vaccine schedule for kids, for babies, and then there's there's an outbreak and everybody rushes to the doctor to get the XYZ vaccine or the flu shot. Are there any instances where a vaccine is a good idea?
I'll tell you how I arrived at the conclusion I'm going to give you, and I promise it won't be a real long answer. But when I started looking into this, I try to take a very middle-of-the-road attitude, that it should be everybody's choice and parents need to be informed, and there's some usefulness for vaccines, but you might have a kid at risk and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, gosh, you're being such a responsible person to not go over on the side of the people who are labeled anti-vax and all that kind of stuff, like it's some population of people from Mars. I mean, the way that folks talk about this. But in any case, over the years, here's my problem with all of this. There's been so much misbehavior and lying and fraud and that sort of thing that I think what we have to do really is stop. You just have to stop this nonsense until you sort it all out and you get some people who aren't shills for the drug companies involved in sorting it out. And here, let me give you some numbers. I don't remember if we talked about it last time, but it's important to what I'm talking about. And that is that the CDC has a foundation, And drug companies give money to the foundation, and then that's how it gets funneled to the CDC. And, of course, the CDC sets vaccination policy. The FDA gets money from the drug companies. In 1992, the PDUFA law was passed, which the drug companies pay the FDA for drug approvals. And so they've taken in close to $8 billion since then. This year, they're going to take in close to $1 billion. It's like $878 million. And the approval rate's 96%. And wouldn't you love to see the 4% they turned down? It must be like intravenous arsenic, and there's probably a conversation in the hallway saying, hey, we wanted to approve this, but we got to look like we're paying attention, so submit it next year. We'll make sure we do it for you. Okay, so when you have that kind of thing going on, and I've written a lot of articles on the misbehavior. There's a whistleblower who came forward and said people suspected for years that the CDC altered the data. I'm the guy who did it. So when you have that kind of thing going on, I think you stop everything until you sort it out. It's like we can't afford to hurt any more people. Now, there's some signs that could end up happening, not anytime soon in the United States, but Japan took the HPV vaccine off the schedule. They've opened 31 centers around the country to help injured women and young girls. The Cochrane collaboration has sued the European Medicines Agency for scientific fraud and misconduct in reference to the HPV vaccine. Over 10,000 doctors in Spain signed a petition concerning vaccines. And so I think we will live long enough to see this whole thing fall apart. But I can't in conscience. I mean, I would never stop somebody from getting a vaccine because I'm not here to intervene. I'm here to provide information. But I would never recommend it. I can't think of any circumstances under which I'd recommend it at this point.
Yeah. And then, so there's not getting the vaccine, but then there are many people who do get their vaccines, whether it's a newborn baby or the flu shot or whatever it may be. And there's a growing population of people who are not only about not getting vaccines, but exposing the harms that the vaccines actually do create. And there are many people who believe that autism, for example, since you brought it up, is created by vaccines. It's actually caused by vaccines. What's your view on that?
Well, the first thing is that I think we have a lot of evidence that vaccines contribute to autism. And you hear this time and time again from parents, and again, the lack of curiosity and wanting to look into this and sort it out sort of floors me. But this is a typical story that parents will tell. We stuck with the schedule as we were instructed to do. It seemed like my child always had trouble after the vaccines. In fact, after one, he was clutching his belly, he screamed and cried and had this foul diarrhea for a few days. Pediatrician said it was just coincidental, had nothing to do with vaccines, and then we took him in for the DTP or MMR, whatever, and then shortly after that, the regression started. And one of the ways that we know that the story is true is cell phones. Everybody has a cell phone, and everybody takes videos and takes pictures of their kid on their cell phone. I've never met anybody with kids or grandkids that didn't have a phone full of this stuff, right? It's terrific because what the parents can show, and when they've come in this office, they say, I want to show you my little boy at his first birthday party. And here's this kid in the backyard playing and running around and eating cake and having a great time. And then here's this kid sitting in the office, and he can't make eye contact, and he's drooling on himself and banging his head on the wall. Okay, so clearly something happened to this child, and you can't say that the child was born this way. He clearly wasn't. We've got the video of the first birthday, and there was a case that just got won in the vaccine court because the pediatrician's own notes were that the child was developing normally. When he came in and got the vaccine, after which he started to regress, the pediatrician made extensive notes in the file about how well the child was doing, met all the developmental standards and goals and the whole 9 yards, and then this perfectly normal kid went home and regressed within hours of the shot. So having said that, it's important to make some qualifying statements. The first thing is the vast majority of people who have vaccines, even the full vaccine schedule, are not harmed in obvious ways. Mm-hmm. They may be harmed in subtle ways. Like we know that the rate of autoimmune disease is going up and allergies and all that, but they're not ending up autistic, they don't die, they don't end up paralyzed and that sort of thing. So the vast majority don't, but there's a genetically susceptible population that if a certain perfect storm of things have happened, creates a likelihood, and sometimes a high likelihood, that autism or some other terrible thing can happen. These are kids who are genetically predisposed to develop autoimmune disease, cesarean birthed, formula fed, frequent infections, lots of antibiotic treatment. These are kids who are highly likely to have this type of reaction. And at the very least, we should be, because we have 2 million vaccine-injured kids in this country, that's the estimate, we should be trying to sort those kids out and make sure that we don't try to vaccinate them. The reason we don't, the party line goes, is because of herd immunity, but I've never understood what the problem is. If all the kids are vaccinated and we have a high vaccination rate in this country, I don't understand how this unvaccinated kid can harm your vaccinated kid. Yeah. And none of them can explain that, but they go, well, we got to have herd immunity. Okay, well, we have it. So explain, first of all, tell me how everybody's still getting these diseases, or a lot of people are. And second of all, if 89% of the kids in the class have a vaccine, tell me how the 11% that don't are going to harm those kids. I just don't get it.
It's, we saw the film Vaxxed shortly after Sophia was born. It came out, and even hearing you tell these stories again of children who were well developmentally and what happened to them. I mean, there were so many stories told by parents in that movie that just, I couldn't even watch. I was crying. It's just like, I'm so heartbroken by that. It makes me so angry.
Well, and if you're a parent, you realize how heinous this is. And the Andrew Wakefield, and he's sort of a lightning. You have to be careful because the conversation ends up being about Andrew instead of the vaccine thing. But Andrew Wakefield wrote a book called Callous Disregard, and what a great title, because that's what we're really talking about here. We're talking about health authorities that have such a callous disregard for the health and welfare of our children that that they're willing to turn a blind eye to this and accuse parents of being crazy and make up silly stories about better diagnostic skills. There was another idiot that wrote an article, I think it ended up being in the New York Times, that all of this was due to, first of all, he confused autism with Asperger's. And he said what happened is that air travel and computers are one of the ways in which autism spread. When you hear this story, it's straight face. He wrote this. It was in the Times. And what happened was all these people that are considered odd, now they can be educated to be proficient at computers, and they can move around the world because of air travel. So a person who is odd in the UK who ends up living in Brazil, the Brazilians don't think he's so weird. They attribute it to a different language and culture. And then he can make a lot of money being a computer programmer, which makes him desirable to women, and he ends up having a family and passing his autistic genes down. I mean, seriously. And how, like I said, callous disregard that somebody would actually put forth such nonsense in answer to all of this. And then, of course, there's the other side of it. The public buys it, and that's another big concern. But if you're interested in this topic, I've landed Cheryl Atkinson for our conference this fall. And she's done a lot of investigative reporting on this issue, as well as a lot of other medical things, and I'm really excited to have her here. She says on her website that she says, I tell you things that others wish I didn't tell you.
It's a good person to have around.
Yes.
Speaking of callous disregard, another thing we wanted to cover with you, because we talked last time about the benefits of a whole food plant-based diet. We talked about some of the problems with meat and dairy, but I don't think we really dove hard into the chronic diseases and how a plant-based diet can, in many cases, completely reverse. And this is a topic that's at the forefront of our lives these days, because there are so many family members we have that are suffering from or may be recovering from diseases like cancer, heart disease, diabetes. Like, it's all around us. And, it's one of the hardest things for me personally, and I think for Stephen as well, is having a family member who we care deeply about go through some kind of treatment, be it a surgery for cancer or or a massive heart surgery, and then go back to eating the same way they were before with no comment on that by a doctor about what might have actually caused this and what you could do, how you could empower yourself to have it not come back. And I just, I'd love for you to talk, I know this is a big topic, but about, some of the research and evidence on the ability of the plant-based diet to, actually cure and reverse these types of diseases.
Well, a couple things. The first thing is that we still have doctors that are claiming that what you eat has nothing to do with whatever disease you have.
Right.
And that just floors me, and I'll tell you why. The average adult eats a ton of food a year. Now, think about the amount of space that a ton of food takes up, and then tell me how it is that you can possibly think that much of anything going through the body would not have an impact. You just can hardly think that somebody could hang on to that idea. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that one of the reasons why we have doctors still giving out bad information, and there's more being written about this, which I'm glad to see, is that the way that medical training is done is that medical doctors are trained by medical doctors in residency. So if the system is wrong, it's being perpetuated. Yeah. In other words, if I'm a bad doctor who doesn't think diet matters, and I'm teaching the next generation of residents in the XYZ hospital system, we're going to end up with the same thing again and again. So we've got to change the training of physicians so that they know better. And that's a shortcoming in education that we can't blame on them. I mean, doctors go to school, they spend a fortune on their education, and the fact that they don't get trained in things like nutrition is disturbing and not necessarily their fault. So I think those are two things that we have to say. But having said that, the reality is that the vast majority of degenerative diseases, we're not talking about car accidents and broken bones, and I'm talking about the arthritis and diabetes and coronary artery disease and autoimmune and that sort of thing, is highly influenced by diet. And even if people eat their way into a disease like this, they often can eat their way out. I mean, that's what a lot of the documentaries are about. And they feature the miraculous stories of people who, threw their meds away. Don't do that. If you're listening to this, please, you need a little help in figuring out what to do. But literally threw their meds away and healed up their bodies on their own. And one discussion that I had recently with a member that I'll share with you, this person has had a disease that could be helped with diet, and that's what she did. And she went back to her doctor and said, and he commented, he said, "You look marvelous." She said, "Yeah, I've been eating this different diet, lost a lot of weight." He said, "Yeah, I can see that." And she said, "And my conditions improved a lot too." And he was kind of quiet. She said, "I found out diet has a lot to do with this." And he said, "Yeah, it does." And she said, "Well, then why didn't you tell me?" He says, "Well, nobody will change their ways, so it doesn't make any difference." She said, "Well, I did. And I think you should tell people and let them decide what to do." So I think there's this pervasive notion that gets in the way of progress, where people think, "Oh, people won't do this. They don't want to help themselves." The myth of the slothful American who doesn't care about his health. I'm so sick of hearing that. It makes me want to scream. I don't think Americans are slothful and don't care about their health. I think Americans spend billions of dollars a year looking for solutions, and if you showed them a good one, a good number of them would do it. So diet is, I don't see anybody getting better if they don't change their diet, and I don't see very many people remaining healthy if they don't change their diet and adopt a health-promoting dietary pattern.
And we've been trained as citizens of the Western world to revere the white jacket on a doctor. And we saw a case where a relative a couple of years ago, I think, had a smoking issue and was told by a doctor who was doing some sort of plastic surgery, basically, that you need to stop smoking or this surgery is going to be somehow compromised. And they stopped smoking. So there's one of the hardest things to do. And we've been telling this person for a long time, like, you probably ought to stop smoking. You've been smoking for a while. And it took the white coat to say it for the behavior to change. So if there's any place where there could be a tipping point, it would be those doctors. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there to support that point, because we have been told to respect that white coat. And boy, if that were to shift, that would change everything.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, there's a great book called I'm trying to think of this, the Social Transformation of American Medicine, It's an interesting book based on our conversation for a lot of reasons, but the first third of the book is about how doctors got control of healthcare. And it wasn't because they were good. People used to hate doctors. They were incredibly disrespected. And back when the environment was much more competitive, people would do almost anything to avoid going to them. And they preferred going to what were called botanists at the time, people who were more into herbal medicine and this sort of thing. Doctors were not paid. The average postal worker made more than the average doctor at this point in time. And so doctors decided to get organized and do something about that. And they managed to do some very clever things and get control of the healthcare marketplace. Now, that's not to say that there haven't been some wonderful advances in medicine and we don't do some pretty cool stuff. I mean, a video, going back to what I said earlier, I recorded a video clip yesterday about a group in Germany who did a skin transplant for a child who had a genetic, terrible skin disease that was going to cause his death. They just built a whole new skin for him. Wow. That's modern medicine doing its thing. This kid's back in school. He's playing soccer. It's amazing. And another one where spina bifida surgery is performed in the womb when the baby was 6 months old, when the fetus was 6 months old, and the mother was able to have a full-term birth vaginally, and the child, it didn't cure it, but this child will have a lot less disability as a result. So there's some wonderful things that have gone on in medicine, but as is usually the case, when one group gets control of something, a lot of bad things happen as a result. So if traditional medicine were in control of the heroic interventional type medicine, and we had competition for some of the other things like dealing with chronic degenerative disease, we'd be better off. And it goes to what you said about the reverence for the white coat. It was engineered that way. It wasn't earned.
And and then that group gets programmed and funded by the people who are making the money out of all this, the drug industries, right? Because I had a number of friends in college who went on to be doctors who really believe they are doing such good work and don't know a thing about nutrition. I watch what they eat and I can't even believe it, and it's that programming is so strong.
Well, it's not just limited to nutrition. They think they're doing good work, and they're doing bad work. Okay, one of the things is they're over-medicating people. Yeah. Too much medicine, medicating people who aren't candidates. They don't even follow their own practice association's guidelines. It's almost like it doesn't happen, like it never happened. So we and there's no clinical judgment. There was a great deal of energy invested in trying to standardize medicine, which always sounds like a good idea. We're going to survey everything, and then we're going to take the best practices, and then this is what everybody's going to do, and then you won't have good doctors and bad doctors because everybody will be doing the same thing. Well, that's such an insane idea because it really is treating humans as if they're automobiles. You know how you have an operations manual for your car? So if a light's blinking or something, you look in the index and you find page 84 and it says change the light bulb. Well, you can't manage humans that way because there are all kinds of considerations in what's going on with a human. So trying to purge clinical judgment from practice, it sounded good. It just turned out to be another disaster because now we just drug anybody who's got an abnormality. Everything is pathology. I mean, and we've trained people, and this is what I see in this office, which just still floors me. People get a hangnail, and they think they should go running to the doctor. Okay, they have a pain in their elbow. Oh my gosh, do you think I should go get this checked out? I don't know. You bumped your elbow, But then while they're hyper vigilant about all this little nonsense, they gain 50 pounds. They take 5 drugs for high blood pressure and cholesterol, and they're completely unconcerned. Completely unconcerned, missing the whole bigger picture. So we have to have a change in the overall mentality of what we think health is all about, and start seeing doctors for the right reason, using westernized medicine for what it's good for, and just changing the perspective. Doctors aren't gods. They're good for what they're good for. If I had a pain in the side, it didn't go away in a few weeks, I think I'd want to go find out what it is. But my gosh, have we done a bad job of promoting health? We've done a good job of promoting medicine, a bad job of promoting health.
This is something else we wanted to talk to you about. It was about, what you recommend people do about healthcare. And I know you've done a lot of thinking and creating on this subject. Last year I left a job, and for the first time we were faced with this conundrum of, what do we get in terms of healthcare? And it was, there's always that fear of the we never go to the doctor basically because we eat so well and we've had no need for a long time, or very little need. And if we would, we thought, well, we'll just pay out of pocket for that because it's so rare. But the question was like, oh, what about that accident? Or, there's always that worry of the big thing coming down the road. But we're just curious about what you recommend to people for, how to best navigate or best access healthcare in this country, given all the profit motives and things going on.
Well, I think a couple things. First of all, the third leading cause of death in the United States is healthcare. So you don't want to start hanging around with doctors unless you need to. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. Stay away from most of the screening tests. I would tell women to get a Pap test every 3 to 5 years. Invest your efforts in taking care of yourself. In other words, nobody just lets their house fall down. If something needs fixed in your house, you call a repairman. You don't wait until the house falls into the backyard, and you don't expect your insurance company to cover it. So become more invested in personal maintenance so that you take care of your body the way you take care of the other things that are important in your life. Another thing, too, is when you do interact with doctors, if it's not an emergency, and when it's an emergency, you let people in the ER save your life. Whatever they say to do, you do. But when it's not an emergency and a doctor suggests something, you say, that's really interesting. I'm going to be looking into it. I'd appreciate any articles you can give me. You seem to be pretty enthusiastic about this, so I'd like to see the stuff that's made you so. I'll be looking into it on my own as well, and I'll be getting back to you in a few weeks and letting you know what my decision is. Instead of this, the doctor says you should have this test or you should take this drug, or whatever, and people go, okay, becoming much more deliberative about it. I'm doing a workshop now for our dinners, and I just filmed it to put on our website about this very issue. And the workshop starts by asking people, how do you buy things? Like when you buy a car, an appliance, or a house, it's a very deliberative process. And then think about the contrast that with the way that you buy health care, which is generally just following directions. And so think about if we switched gears for a minute and you bought everything else the way you buy health care. So somebody would pull into my parking lot with a new car, and I'd say, wow, that's a new car. And they go, yeah, I hate it, but it's the one the salesman said I have to drive. Nobody does that, right? Yeah. Oh, I see you're moving into a new house. Well, it really wasn't the kind of thing I was looking for, but, the realtor is so much smarter than me, so I guess I'll just live in it, People investigate more before they buy blenders than they do before they have a procedure or take a toxic drug. And so if you just get into this, show me the evidence, back to our vaccine discussion, I am out of patience with people who want to challenge me on things, and they don't know what they're talking about. So I tell them, listen, you bring me your evidence. I can't wait to review it. Let's set up a time. Bring me all these journal articles that have made you so convinced, and you just never hear from them again. And it ends the discussion. So if we take the discussion of healthcare to a higher level, where we just basically say this is important, it should be an evidence-based discussion that leads people to the place where they can make an informed decision, not a right or wrong decision, because people decide to do things for different reasons that maybe wouldn't suit me, but an informed decision. We'd get rid of 2/3 of the health care bill in this country. The country would be much more self-responsible and enjoy better health, and we'd solve a whole lot of our problems that way.
Well, and one thing that I know that I've experienced, although not in the last 5 to 6 years, but I know a lot of people feel this way, is that there's a belief out there that health, the body, biology, healthcare, it's so complicated. I just couldn't. This doctor is telling me to do this, and I just trust him because I couldn't possibly understand how the body works and what health really means. It must be I need these 3 injections in this procedure in order to feel good.
That's why we're in business.
Well,
why we're in business,
right,
because our contention is anybody can understand it.
So tell us, like, the simple, like, what is health? What does it actually look like?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. Health is not the absence of disease. Health is the presence of a vibrant body that allows you to do the things that you want to do in life. It's feeling good. It's feeling energetic. It's the ability to reduce the risk of disease as much as possible, and also the ability to bounce back from an illness. This is the healthy person doesn't never get sick. The healthy person, like I've had the flu 2 times in the last 15 years, and each time it lasted for 6 hours. Okay, so this is a this is a healthy person. It was horrible. I hated it, and then I had to sleep for about 12 hours because having the flu wears you out, as it turns out. And then the next day you go to work a little bit late, and by the third day it's like it never happened. So you bounce back quickly from things that happen. And then there's a mental health aspect of this too. And it's not being just not depressed. It's being it's having a purposeful life with values and ethics and that bring happiness to you and connection to people. I mean, these are the things that we define as health. Most people define health as I haven't been diagnosed with something, or I haven't been drugged up for a mental illness, so I must be doing okay. I think we should set the bar a little bit higher. And by the way, how you get to that stage of enjoying what I think is true health is, first of all, informed decision-making so you don't get hurt. But the second thing is you have to become very proactive and intentional about health. And most people are reactive and episodic. They do what they want to do, then they get sick, they go to a doctor, they take some drugs or have a procedure, and then they go back to what they were doing before, and they wait for the next thing to happen. In the world of being a healthy person, you decide that health is a priority. You build it into your daily, weekly, monthly, annual routine. I've never seen somebody drive around on a flat tire for 6 months claiming they just didn't have time to get it fixed. Mm-hmm. Who does this, right? So you treat your body the way you treat other important things. And then here's another thought that I'll give you that I think is important, and that is that people will claim they don't have time and all this. Here's my observation. I think everybody spends the same amount of time and money on health throughout their lifespan. It's a question of what they spend it on. So at my age, at 61, my friends are having body parts taken out. They're taking drugs. They go to doctors. They have to pay co-pays. This is time-consuming. It costs money. I don't do any of that. I spend money on food. I spend money on running shoes. I spend money on, I own a gym and a yoga studio, so that doesn't cost me anything. But I invest my time in taking care of myself. It's the same amount of time. It's just spent on things that are more productive, and I have a better quality of life. I don't want to have body parts taken out. I don't like hospitals. I don't want to go there,
Mm. Well, I know that it's almost time for us to wrap up with you, Pam, and that's a great place to be. Since you started out saying that, you've been feeling like it's all negative stuff lately, we wanted to ask you at the end of the conversation. We're not going to ask our usual 3 questions since we did them with you last time, but the final question we've been asking guests, we wanted to ask you, which is, what are you most excited about now?
Oh, gosh, I'm so excited about so many things I can't begin to tell you. I'm writing a book with Peter Bregan, and that's exciting, just even to be asked, Mm-hmm. I am writing a Cochrane review, which was like the best invitation ever, and I'm very excited about that. That's a project I'm taking on this year, and we had Peter Goethe here as a presenter at our conference last year, and we got to know each other a little bit better, and he said in front of the group on Sunday morning, he said the Cochrane Library is a little light on nutrition, so I'm going to invite Dr. Pam Popper to start writing some reviews, and he made sure everybody knew how hard it was going to be, and he sent me about 500 pages of instruction, but I'm going to do that, and I'm very excited about that. I'm teaching a class on sports nutrition right now that's packed. I think I have 60 people in it, and I'm loving it. It's a whole new thing I haven't done so much research on. And we got Peter Bregan's course, Why and How to Withdraw from Psychiatric Drugs, approved last year. And we've been teaching that, and I've been having a blast. We have a wonderful psychiatrist from Baltimore who's helping to teach it. And I never thought I would say these 2 words in one sentence, vegan psychiatrist. Have you ever heard that together before?
Nice.
Yeah. Peter Bregan is now eating a plant-based diet. He's lost 24 pounds. He's off his blood pressure meds. His wife has reversed a disease that she had for 30 years. He's quite the proponent. You can watch the interview on my YouTube channel. So there are so many good things going on. And that's why I still come to work. I mean, if I thought that this was all doom, gloom, and hopelessness, I would stay home and find something else to do. But I'm excited about coming in every day because look at what's happened. You think about it, what was it, 19 years ago, they were trying to put me in jail for doing this. And now I'm writing articles that are published in medical journals. I got an article published in an oncology journal last year. So it's a big shift from trying to put me out by putting me in jail to where I am now, right?
Yeah.
All good.
Something's definitely moving in the right direction, and God bless you for all the work you're doing. It's crucial.
You.
I mean, it really is life-saving.
Thank you. I'm enjoying it. I love coming to work. I love what I do. I feel like the happiest, luckiest person on the planet to be able to do something that I love that I don't want to stop. That's another thing. At this age, your friends are starting to talk about retirement. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what? Retirement? What?
Yeah,
what else? And they say, well, what would you like to do? I said, what I like to do, I'm doing now. You know, I'd rather actually sit home and make curricula for sports nutrition than travel, I guess, at this point in time. Makes me a dull girl, but I'm a pretty happy clam.
Oh, it's beautiful. You're clearly thriving what you do, Pam, and you're so good at it.
Very undull. All right. Well, thank you so much, Pam. This has been great, and thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me again. I hope we get to do it a third time.
I bet we will. Thanks.
All right.
That's it for this week's Ownstream podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this awesome interview with Dr. Pam Popper. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode for links to everything mentioned, including Pam's website, social media profiles, her YouTube channel, which is a wealth of knowledge, links to the various books she mentioned, and the other resources we discussed. All of that can be found at ownstream.co/Pam Popper 2. That's ownstream.co/PAMPOPPER 2.
And that's the number 2, by the way. Also, please sign up for our weekly tip-off email at ownstream.co and just click the sign up button in the upper right-hand corner. This is where we share each Monday 3 cool things we've learned in the last week in the areas of lifestyle, business, and spirit. This could be an amazing quote, individual tip, or tool designed to bring you more freedom and power in your life. So definitely sign up for that again at ownstream.co and just click sign up.
Finally, please leave us a review on iTunes. We really need your help in expanding our reach, helping us to inspire more people and spread the amazing ideas discussed on this episode with Dr. Pam Popper and others too. If it feels right to you, simply go to iTunes, search for Ownstream Podcast, click ratings and reviews, then click that 5th star and leave us a brief comment on how this episode has inspired you. Thanks so much for considering that. We are very grateful. Also, we're on Twitter at Ownstream and on Instagram, where we post regularly at own_stream. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening to the Ownstream podcast. To learn more and connect with us, please visit ownstream.co or follow us on Twitter at Ownstream and Instagram at own_stream.